Well, OK, this is an interesting, Pearl, because if you look at the revenue, for example, in 2019, FIFA generated £586 million in total revenue. The men's, for the 2019-22 cycle, 5.8 billion. Record revenue through the Men's World Cup. So the women's game has come on in leaps and bounds. The English Lionesses, fantastic win, sell-out crowds. They're making a lot more money. They're definitely way, way further now towards where the men are commercially than they were, but they're still a way off. And when you saw at Wimbledon, for example, the men's final was watched by 3 times as many people, and yet they were both free to air on the BBC. You could watch both if you wanted to. So there was 3 times as much interest in the men's game. They played 2 sets more per match than the women do.
Don't watch
the women get equal pay. I'm not quite sure why. I don't think it's a matter of equality. It's just a matter of fairness, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think all of the women should thank the men for funding our leagues, because most of our leagues would not exist without the men, number one. Number two, when we have the same numbers, then we should get the same pay. I'm sorry, I play volleyball at the highest level, and it's like, when we make what the men make and get the crowds that the men draw, then we should get paid the same.
Also, why is
there's really nothing else to it. It's really that simple. If you can get the revenue that the men get, then you should get the same pay. It's really that simple. This argument of the pay gap in sports makes no sense to me. Even within men's sports, not all the men are getting paid the same, so it doesn't even make sense. There's people in the same team who are not even getting the same pay. So what's all this pay gap of women should get paid the same as men, but you don't even bring in the revenue that they bring in? Makes absolutely no sense.
Why is it actually a fight for equality, Grace? I mean, why, if women in a particular sport, for example, turned out to generate more revenue, right, because they were more watchable, and in America, the women's football team is better than the men, and they do generate, even at...
They're not better than the men. They're just doing better in terms of probably the revenue that they're bringing in. But if we put the USA's men's football team against the women's, we all know what's going to happen. So they're not better than them. They just do better in terms of possibly the revenue that they bring in, and that's it.
School level, far more interest from girls than boys, for example. I don't see why equality should be the aim. Why shouldn't they get paid more than the men?
Well, look, I mean, there are all sorts of problems with the way that this market for labour, and it is basically a market for labour, works. Like, I personally don't think that the top football players in the world should be paid as much as they do. I think it's ridiculous, the amount.
But that's market force.
Exactly. It's market forces.
Well, why shouldn't they get that?
Should that be the way that we decide, you know, who generates what? Personally, I'm very much in favour of the fact that they came out there and said collective bargaining. Ultimately, like, the average worker in this country hasn't had a pay rise in over a decade. How is that going to change? That's going to change when they organise with one another.
I am so tired of women whining.
Mate,
it's
the only
like
person whining at the moment is you.
Literally, the men fund our leagues, and we will still whine that we don't get paid enough. And honestly, when athletes do shit like this, it makes all of us look bad. Because instead of being thankful for the league that we have, we go out and whine and complain about the pay.
I mean, as I said, I'm not whining. You sound like you're maybe doing a bit of whining. But, like, personally, I don't think we should be whining. I think people should be organising. If you want a pay increase, join a union, get out there and fight for it. That's my view.
Should the women footballers get the same as the men?
Yeah, I think it probably makes sense.
Even if they're not making...
How do you come to that conclusion? You're not bringing in the same money as them, but yeah, let's pay them the same just because. As I've said, even within the men's league, men get paid different. They're not getting paid the same amount. But women want to be talking about equality, and let's all just get paid the same. Even if we're not making the same money, even if we're not bringing the same money, we should just get paid the same, which is stupidity.
Anything like the revenue?
Ultimately, like, it's not going to change. It's not going to change unless they organise. That's actually true across every sector in the economy. If you want a pay rise, join a union and fight for one.
Let me ask you this, though. They have got unions. But
exactly.
Let me ask you this. On talent alone, for example, as a yardstick, the US women's football team were beaten by a group of under-15 boys from Texas, right, who were very good, under-15 boys, but their under-15 boys team beat them, I think, about 8-9-0 or something. So why should women footballers, who are clearly nowhere near as good as their male counterparts, just technically, why should they get paid anything like as much money?
Well, I mean, you know, it sucks, doesn't it, that, like, as a woman... Yeah, OK, you play volleyball. I'm a surfer. I absolutely love surfing. It's very hard for women to build up a body strength. This is something that I've learned very much the hard
No
way.
way.
And so, you know,
Surfers, by the way,
What?
there is equal pay.
yeah, there is. And
No
actually,
way,
you
I
know,
didn't know
it's one of those sports where
Can a
in
woman
my
be as good
opinion,
as a man or not?
well, it's different. It's a different sport, really. It's not, you know, it is the same sport, but it's very different watching a woman surf than it is watching a man surf because, you know, the average male body is different from the average woman, like woman's body for all these
But
No
is there any
way.
actual technical
Didn't know
reason
that.
why a woman can't do with a surfboard what a man can do?
Yeah, there's loads of reasons. Like, it is about the upper body strength. It's about, like, the way that the body is built.
So should women surfers at the elite level get the same as men?
But, like, again, I think it just is different. Like, it's a different kind of game, and people watch it, I think,
You're
for different
shaking your head.
reasons.
No, I just think when we start making the same amount of money as the men, then we should get paid the same as the men. I don't hear the men whining about OnlyFans models getting paid more than them. I don't hear the men whining
Is that
about
true?
models getting paid more than them. Kendall Jenner is the highest paid supermodel. Where are the male
But if you
supermodels?
averaged
But
out-
whenever men dominate in an industry, women will just complain.
I mean, I don't know if that's true about OnlyFans, because there are a lot of men on OnlyFans as well. But I mean,
You have got to be kidding me. Her whole point was men are not complaining that OF models are getting paid more. And then she says there's a lot of men on OF. That wasn't her point, but hey, you know, the feminists never really answer questions. They just make up a wholly different point that had nothing to do with what she was saying.
look, the main point
You
here...
think they make the same?
I have no idea, but like maybe
then
if you
why were
averaged
you-
out the number of men and women that are on that website. Anyway, look, the main point here, and the point that I came on here that I wanted to make
Go on.
was that the problem that we have in our economy at the moment is not that like the average football player isn't paid the same as the average man. It is probably an injustice, and I'm glad that they're organising and working together to fight for that. But ultimately, the problem we have in our economy is that nobody's getting paid enough money because inflation's eroded people's wages. Even before that, no one had a pay rise in a really long time. And the lesson from this is, as I've said, I'm going to say it again because it's an important lesson and no one knows about them anymore because they see them as a hangover from the 1970s. Join a union because otherwise your bosses are going to
Yeah,
walk
but there
all
are
over you.
unions for all these. It's the unions that are fighting for them.
Exactly.
But okay, but just as a general point, though, the principle you think that women should get paid the same, even if they're not as technically as good and not producing as
Well,
much
it's a
revenue.
subjective judgment, isn't it, on whether or not they're like technically as good?
Well, not
No,
really.
it's not. No, it's not.
Because people watch men and
No,
women's
it's
sports
not.
for different reasons.
Well, let me give an example.
There is no subjectivity to who is better in sports. We see across, if most sports, if not all of them, that men are just better than women. It's not subjective, and the reason why you watch it for entertainment. Men are more entertaining. There's better goals. They score more goals. Well, not even, I don't want to say more goals, but the goals are better. And if you really want to, if these feminists are really, really, really about their equality, why don't we just settle this? And if they really want to get paid the same as men, how about we just put the men's teams and let's face the women's teams and let's see how they fare. And if they're able to beat the men's teams, then I think they should get paid the same. But we all know what will happen if the men's teams face the women's teams.
An example would be the Olympics. If you made it non-gender specific, how many women would win medals?
Well, I mean,
None.
okay. if
Exactly.
I mean,
you're-
maybe in equestrian and maybe in shooting, I think, are the
But
two.
again, I think-
where there's no sense that the men might win.
You can say like, oh, you know, this group is better than this group. But again, I think it's different.
Men are
It's
better than
different.
women
We
at
watch-
sports. Yes, let's not live in this delusion.
really that simple.
And in most,
I
Thank
played
you.
and in most
16
cases,
years
and in
of
most cases,
professional
Grace,
sports.
more people, men and women, want to watch men play sport.
Correct.
I mean,
That's just a
Simple
demonstrable
as.
fact. That may change.
name
And my point is,
five-
if it changes, I don't see why equality should be the only ambition for the women. If it turns out that in some sport women get more viewers watching and therefore draw more revenue, I'm all for them getting more money than the men.
Can you name
Same
5
here.
WNBA players? 5 female soccer players?
I mean, I can't name any soccer players
That's
already.
crazy. I
What
wish we
is
had the support
WNBA?
from the
basketball?
feminists.
I don't
we
know.
would get equal pay if we would just get the support from the feminists.
Well, let me
What
tell
do
you-
you
let me
mean?
tell
I
you-
just name 5.
Let me tell
Name
you.
five what WNBA. I don't even know what the WNBA
we
is.
need our
Basketball.
support.
You're asking the wrong person.
Yeah,
I
you
think.
really are.